DW Africa Link.
South Africa's top law enforcement official, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, has accused US President Donald Trump of twisting the facts to push a false narrative about mass killings of white people in South Africa. During talks in Washington barely a week ago, Trump ambushed his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, by showing a 4-minute video showing an aerial view of a rural road with lines of white crosses erected on either side. Trump used this to support his unfounded and refuted claims of a white genocide in the country that overcame decades of apartheid. On top of that, fact-checkers have also debunked some of the pictures used as not even from South Africa. So why will Trump and his team twist the facts and make false claims about white genocide in South Africa? And what does this say about the relationship between both countries? That's what's coming up. I am Eddy Micah Jr, and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
South Africa struggles with extremely high levels of violent crime. Although farm killings make up a small percentage of the country's overall homicides, both white and black farmers are attacked and sometimes killed, and the government has condemned the violence against both groups. Now, according to recent crime stats, out of more than 5,700 homicides in South Africa from January through to March, 6 occurred on farms, with one of those victims being white. And yet, Trump claims a genocide of white farmers is going on. To shed more light on this, we have Dr Thokozani Chilenga-Butao, a lecturer in the Political Studies Department of the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, and my colleague Nontokozo, DW correspondent in Cape Town, South Africa. Their expertise will help us understand the situation better. Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Africa Link podcast. Let me start with you, Dr Chilenga-Butao. Claims of a white genocide in South Africa have been circulating for years, catching the attention of right-wing groups in the US. Just to be clear, is this an issue at all in South Africa, or is Trump just making a fuss?
Thank you so much, Eddy. I think there is a problem, although it's not genocide, and the problem is violent crime in South Africa. This is a problem that people complain about daily, that we receive news reports about daily. And quite frankly, that, many members of the public have expressed is out of control. In the case of white farmers, we need to extrapolate what the possible causes could be. Over the years, some of the causes that have been recorded are simply violent crimes on farms, because farms are not in close proximity to law enforcement agencies such as the police. And so crimes in these areas seem to be far worse when police are quite a distance away. On the other hand, there can sometimes be violent crimes as a result of disputes that take place on farms between farmers and farm workers. And we've seen quite recently, I think up until last year or earlier this year, where disputes between farm workers and farmers have resulted in quite tragic and vicious and violent crimes. Thirdly, I think that the claims of genocide have come up because white South Africans, as a minority in South Africa, feel as though government and law enforcement are not paying attention to crimes that they feel are very particular in farm areas, but they don't know how to articulate it apart from using language such as genocide. And that is not helped either by the fact that, as you know, South Africa continues to face a lot of racial inequality and backlash from that from some opposition parties who, have said inflammatory things against the white population.
Right, which Trump was definitely eager to play. Julius Malema, for instance, some of his rhetoric that many criticize or find quite harsh. So just in a nutshell, from what you've said, obviously not a genocide of white farmers in South Africa, but you're talking about a general serious crime problem that is affecting both white and black South Africans. But are there instances that some crimes against white farmers have come about maybe after investigation or whatever it is that was done after, that comes across as people attacking some farmers just because they're white?
In my view, and from what I've read, that isn't the case. As I say, a lot of the times the problem is a dispute between farmers and farm workers that can turn deadly. But to say that there have been obvious or apparent instances where farmers have been attacked for being white, I have to be honest and say that I haven't come across that. However, wherever there is a minority racial group in a country, I think that there will be those fears that they are being attacked on the basis of race. And what I think our government has not done is make sure that we understand the causes of those crimes, explain them in crime statistics, and quite frankly, be honest if there are instances where this is racially motivated, as well as be honest in instances where it's not racially motivated, so that the public can understand the nuances of the issue, instead of moving between extremes of saying it is only criminality or it is only something that could be reflective of a genocide. Right.
I mean, when Trump made these comments, literally the whole world was against it, right? A spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office has condemned Trump's comments on white genocide claims, saying, one should not use this word, genocide, casually. It's a word that, it really evokes a lot of emotion, and not just that, it takes a lot to use that word. And from the issues that Trump was talking about happening in South Africa, there was nowhere near the time to use that G word, which you obviously are also against. So what does it mean when the so-called leader of the free world, the most powerful country in the world, America, when its leader says South Africa is having a genocide against its white farmers?
Firstly, it means that he is not taking in contrary information or information that has disproved that there isn't a white genocide in South Africa. He is not taking into cognizance all the news and the outlets and the investigations by journalists, and other human rights groups that prove that there is no white genocide. And that is worrying. We know that during Trump's first presidency, but even now, he has had a problem with mainstream media. And so beyond the repeated use of the words white genocide, he is showing that he doesn't listen to or accept what the mainstream media is reporting. And that is worrying on many levels, not only for international relations, but for Americans themselves. What does your president listen to and why? I think it also shows that theatrics is more important than facts. You might have heard, people in the past few years saying that we're living in a post-truth era where people will only accept truth as they understand it or what they want to be truth. And this is that magnified by 1,000 times, right? Where you have someone who will use theatrics and will use optics, as we saw in the Oval Office, to magnify what they think the truth is, and fully expect everyone to accept that. And that, again, is worrying for global relations. We saw in his takedown of Zelensky in the White House a few months ago, but also worrying for the state of the US and anyone who might be wondering, how else would the president use theatrics to demonstrate the truth that only he believes?
Right. It's interesting how you put it. The truth that only he believes. Well, he and Elon Musk, right? I feel your fellow South African, which I have a feeling is not the most popular person in South Africa. Now, I'm going to come to you, Togo, in a bit. But before that, let's go to Nontokozo, DW correspondent on the ground. Nonto, you are in Cape Town, an area which is, as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, predominantly white or has quite a large majority of white South Africans. What's been the general mood in those neighborhoods after Trump made the claim of white genocide in South Africa?
I mean, yes. Hi, Eddie, and it's good to have this conversation with you. So I'd say, the general mood in South Africa as a whole, and I guess just particularly in Cape Town, has really been exactly what Dr. Thokozani has expressed. A lot of people feel like what happened at the Oval Office was obviously an ambush, and it is not true, a misrepresentation of facts. So a lot of the white people that I've interacted with so far, even online, completely disagree with the statements made by the US president. You will find one or two of them who see this as an opportunity to further say or make claims about the so-called white genocide, who will, I know for example, online there was one particular one who made comments about John Steenhuisen's response or comment in the Oval Office, and saying that he sold them out and did not represent them. And I am wondering in what sense John Steenhuisen would have sold them out, given that he spoke against the controversial Julius Malema and how him and his party want to keep that lot. He particularly said that lot out of parliament and called him a rebel. But again, I think because he did not say that there's a white genocide or there's crime particularly aimed at white people, they feel betrayed. But it's only a few, literally just a few, because most of them will tell you that it's not true. So the mood is basically just like that. Everyone is quite surprised.
And people clearly still baffled, like, what was that, right? Like, what's going on here? There's also one of the clips that Trump showed President Ramaphosa there was one of Julius Malema, who's in the opposition, who's been known to have wild political rallies, right? Singing songs with, quote, "Kill the Boer," which is to many a controversial anti-apartheid song that critics say calls for violence against white people or white farmers. Tell us more about Anonto and what role this plays in all of this.
So, Eddie, you're correct in that Julius Malema is a very controversial figure in South Africa and internationally. And the song "Kill the Boer" has become the center of attention in all of this. But I think what's important is that it needs to be understood in context, in the South African context as well, without necessarily saying that he should continue singing the song. But if you follow the developments in the past, you'd realize that even the Constitutional Court, if I'm not mistaken, would have made a judgment to say that that song does not particularly instigate violence against white people or against white farmers, but in fact is a struggle song, an anti-apartheid song that is sang in the context of pushing against white supremacy in the country. I think former President Jacob Zuma sang the song before when he led the ANC. There were concerns raised, and as far as I am aware, the ANC promised to not sing the song again. And of course, that would have been, a choice that they made, but not because it's a song that is particularly aimed at killing the white race. So, yeah, it's a contextual one, but a very controversial one, obviously.
And Nonto, a local representative of an area showed in a video played at the White House said, she was, quote, sad that US President Donald Trump used the footage of hundreds of white crosses as false evidence of mass killings of white South African farmers. You dug a bit into this. What more can you tell us about those crosses that Trump represented as evidence?
Sure. So the crosses on that video were placed a couple of years ago as a temporary memorial for a couple that was murdered on their farm. Their names were Glenn and Vida Rafetti, and it was in a rural town near Newcastle in KwaZulu-Natal, which is another province here in South Africa. They've since been removed, so they don't actually exist anymore on that road. And recently, their son, his name is Nathan Rafetti, he now lives in Australia, confirmed that those crosses were only placed there as a tribute to his parents. And he also expressed how that video played by Donald Trump during that discussion or conversation opened up old wounds, because, the last thing he would have expected is seeing his traumatic past being televised on international television like that. So, but yeah, the people were found who murdered that couple, and as far as I know, are still in prison, were sentenced, found guilty of the murder.
Right.
And yeah, so that's what the crosses are about. Right.
I mean, it just seems that everything seemed all over the place in that meeting, right? And look, there's some critics of Ramaphosa who even think that, or believe, just like many, that he really composed himself correctly. I mean, now people know what to expect when you go and meet Trump in the Oval Office. Toko, what does it say to you, considering, the U.S. boasts of the world's top intelligence services? You have the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, you have the Federal Bureau of Intelligence. Somehow all of these agencies and the secretaries and the PAs, all of those could not really dig into proper, correct information before such a high-profile meeting. What does that say about this, first of all, what it is, but also US's relationship with South Africa and what they wanted to achieve with this?
So firstly, I think what it says, looking at what you've raised around intelligence and how the US really, seems to have a strong security and intelligence sector, is that maybe they are not attuned or aware to what is really happening, or possibly they are quite attuned and aware that there is no white genocide in South Africa, but they are working in a time where their information is not being transmitted or received to the presidency. I don't know whether it is misinformation that is just being amplified around the Oval Office. I'm not sure whether it is about the individuals who hold certain offices, but this is definitely one to watch, because we are only, if I'm not wrong, 5 months into, this US presidency. And so if this is an example of how intelligence is or is not used, then, as I said earlier, it's worrying for our international relations, but also, for those living in the US, especially minorities who would rely on those intelligence agencies or expect them, to have particular reactions to how they are being treated.
Right. Thank you very much. Dr. Thokozani Chilenga-Butao, lecturer in the Political Studies Department at the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. And also many thanks to my colleague Nontokozo Mchunu, TW correspondent in Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you very much, ladies, for your insights. So let's fact check this. I have Yosabel Chetti, researcher at the Center for Information Integrity in Africa. That's a research institute based at Stellenbosch University School of Journalism. Thank you very much, Yosabel, for making the time to talk to us. I mean, look, a lot of people have been sharing their opinion about this grand meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa. What were you thinking when these two leaders met and Trump presented some fake information about the genocide of white farmers during this meeting?
Hi, Eddie, and thank you so much for having me on your show today. So when I was watching Trump present some of that information, I think the first kind of thoughts that went through my head were, if I was a member of the Trump administration who had been feeding him some of this information to make him believe that there was a genocide taking place in the country, as they say in the business consulting world, I would want to CYA, which is cover my you-know-what. So in the ambush video, as we're referring to it in South Africa, we see attempts at the Trump administration to show why it is they truly believed, why it was possible that they could have believed that this was taking place in South Africa, that there was such a genocide against white people taking place in South Africa, when in reality, we know that there is no such thing happening.
Maybe briefly help us fact check the picture that was from the DRC instead of South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, I think when Reuters put that article out, it blew my mind, because as Trump was going through those articles and going death, 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 I was questioning. I was like, I would love to get my hand on some of those articles. And I'm so grateful that our president did ask if we could see those articles afterwards. And I think that the international observer consensus around that now seems to be that this has been a win for Ramaphosa, and that fact checkers afterwards did work to debunk Trump's claims. But this is more than just you showing this misleading information.
Right.
It's about Trump's quest to assert perhaps whiteness in the White House rather than being interested in facts.
Right. So final words from you would be your advice on the importance of fact-checking for world leaders and indeed for journalists and everybody else. When you hear information, the importance of fact-checking it.
Yes, I think the important thing with any information that you're presented with, particularly where it's political in nature, is how does it make you feel? Is that information making you feel angry? If it's making you feel angry, ask what is sitting at the center of that anger. Where is this coming from? And that is why there's such a stress, such importance that we're putting on to digital literacy and digital policy in South Africa and across the rest of Africa, so that our people don't have to find themselves in such awkward situations where they're misrepresenting facts to the entire world.
Right, because that can be very damaging. Yosabel Chetti, researcher at the Center for Information Integrity in Africa, a research institute based at Stellenbosch University School of Journalism. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Eddie.
Some extra information for you. Whites make up around 7% of South Africa's 63 million people, but generally still have a much better standard of living than the black majority more than 30 years after the end of the apartheid system of racial segregation. Whites make up the majority of the country's wealthier commercial farmers. Trump issued an executive order on February 7th that cut all U.S. financial assistance to South Africa and accused it of mistreating white Afrikaner farmers and seizing their land. The order accused Ramaphosa's government of fueling disproportionate violence against racially disfavored landowners. Trump's executive order also accused South Africa of pursuing an anti-American foreign policy. Specifically, it criticized its decision to launch a case at the International Court of Justice accusing U.S. ally Israel of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The order accused South Africa of supporting the Palestinian militant group Hamas through that case. So, what do you think about all of this? We value your thoughts and encourage you to share them with us on our Facebook page, DW Africa. Listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. And don't forget to click follow and subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Mugabe. And I am Eddy Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.